Cause I'm the box getter, box getter.
Cause I can get you home faster than you ever thought. And I can have you in my bed tonight. And I can rock your body harder than you ever have. Baby, I will take you for a ride. Cause I ain't playing, no I ain't playing.
Alright, it's your boy, Frankie Nuñez. Welcome to episode 4 of the LOL podcast, a very special episode. To my left, we have the Hall of Fame wide receiver, the greatest of all time, Justin O'Shea here. He's going to co-host with me all day. Justin, are you happy to be here?
Oh, happy to be here, Frank. LOL, 10-year.
Couldn't be more excited. This is special for me. I've been a fan of yours since Bowl 1. You've always been my favorite player. I'm super happy to be here with you. And Justin is going to help me rank every single LOL championship team, all 9 champions. We're going to rank each one from what we thought was the best to the worst championship team. Obviously, all the teams were great, but some had more talent than others, and we'll get into all that. Are you excited for that one, Justin?
Oh, excited to get through the rankings, to go over the teams, to go over all the years, Frankie.
Justin is a part of 6 of those 9 championship teams, so he'll be able to give us a lot of insight and detail into what it was like to be in those locker rooms and what it was like to play for those teams. So we're going to get into that next. We're going to take a quick short break, but we'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the official LOL podcast. It's your boy, Frankie Nuñez. A special shout-out to our boy, Lil Jame. We're going to get straight into this ranking. Me and Hall of Famer Justin O'Shea, we're going to rank every championship team, 1 through 9. Obviously, these teams are great. They've all won, but we feel as if some of the teams are better than others. And the rubric we're going to go by is a 3-tier system. We're going to talk about the roster talent and evaluation itself. We're going to talk about the team's actual play on the field that year and the team's cultural impact. You ready to get into it, Justin?
Let's do it, Frankie.
So me and Justin have gone over this. We've got the 2012-2013 Team Frank in the number 9 spot as what you would say our least talented championship team. This was the first ever championship team. Justin, you were on that team. Tell me a little bit about that team.
I mean, me, Frank Samisa, Mike C., Mark Olivero, and Dan Esco. Mark Olivero has a ring.
Unbelievable. Let's recall some of the game. That game, Team Frank gets out to a big lead. It's a game to 10. Team Frank gets out to a big lead. They end up that lead evaporates quickly, and in a situation where it is 4th and 1 on the goal line, Team Dan has a chance to tie the game at 9-9. And then what happens?
The infamous Dan O'Shea fumble.
The fumble. Dan O'Shea goes to hand the ball to Joe Labo. Joe Labo isn't ready for it. The ball hits the deck. They both, for some reason, look at it, and Mike C. makes the play of the day, dives on the ball, secures that final possession. Team Frank goes down the field, scores the game-winning touchdown. What was that like?
Oh, man, just to be a part of that, to feel like you're on the ropes. They're about to go in and score.
Unreal.
And then just the tides turn. Mike C. lands on that ball. We knew we were coming away with the win.
So when we talk about, in the 9 spot, the roster evaluation here, obviously, as you said, Mike C., Mark, Dan Escobar, Justin O'Shea, Frank Samisa, it is not a very talented team, especially when you looked at Team Dan that year. Ian Tully, Colin Tully, Lorenzo Labazetta, Joe Labo, Trapezzo. We're talking all-time greats on that team. So the fact that they were able to get it done with that team is pretty amazing, but it was not a super talented team.
No, when you look at the roster, it's, Team Frank, they don't even look like they should be there at the end.
Right, exactly.
It shouldn't even be close.
Right. The play on the field, as we said, they got out to the lead. It evaporated, so another reason for this sort of lower ranking. And the cultural impact is the one thing this team has going for it. I would say it's a 10 out of 10 stat. This is the team that started all. This is a very important team in LOL history. So that they had going for them, but everything else is why they find themselves in the 9 spot. Let's move on to number 8. We've got the 2019-2020 Mothmen. This was Team Holmes' first championship. This was the good old coach's first ring. This team consisted of Frank Samisa, later to be named MVP, Justin O'Shea, Josh Paini, Ken Silver, and the good old coach John Stam himself. Tell me a little bit about that team.
I mean, I tell you, playing for the good old coach, he knows what he's doing. We were very happy to bring him home his first ring. He deserved it.
Interviewing him, we had him on episode 1. Interviewing him felt like playing for him, which was chaotic and a nightmare. With that being said, I could see how it would be the most fun thing you could ever do.
Yeah, he's a player's coach.
Oh, I'm sure.
You know.
So let's talk about roster evaluation. Outside of Frank and Justin, this team did not have that superstar. Obviously, those two are as good as it gets, but Ken Silver was huge the whole preseason and game day. Ken Silver had 4 touchdowns and over 10 catches. He was huge for them. Their play on the field, phenomenal. They win 5-0 in their first round matchup. They win the championship 5-3, but it never felt that close. And there was only one possession where they did not score a touchdown. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think that was on a drop by me, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't remember exactly, but I do remember you guys attempted to run a trick play where you came in motion and took that direct snap, and Frank went out for a pass. That was a failure.
Yes, I remember that.
Cultural impact of this team is that it's the good old coach's first ring. This was the first franchise to win a championship that wasn't Team Frank or Team Dan, the original two. So this was the first ever expansion championship franchise. That's a big deal for the league, obviously.
Yeah, that's huge. What was that, the 8th year?
That would have been in year 8. Yeah.
Year 8, so 7 years prior. No
Yeah.
other coach. So.
But, the general lack of elite talent everywhere is why that team finds itself in the 8th spot. Let's move on to the number 7 team, the 2018-2019 Smokes, Team Dan. This team had some good talent on it. Let's go across it. Obviously, Dan O'Shea himself, not a lot of talent there. Ian was in, and Ian was subbed after the first game for Wesley, so Ian Wesley kind of take one spot. Renzo later to be named MVP. John Macca, Nick Muse, and Ray Sullivan. Pretty good talent everywhere. What do you remember? You played that team and lost to them in the championship. What do you remember about that team?
I mean, I remember Renzo was dialed in that day.
Oh, for
and
sure.
You're talking, that's the first year with no Justin and no Frank coming home. So, I mean, that was big. Great team. They came up big.
And I think we'll go straight into the cultural impact. I think that's pretty important. This was no Frank. This was no Justin, as you said. That had never happened. This was the team that finally made Dan O'Shea actually relevant as a coach.
Yeah.
We know he had won the championship in year 2, but that had been so many years prior. This was his, sort of biggest accomplishment. And it was a huge coming out party for Renzo, who, would go on to be one of the league's best.
Yes, one of the greats.
Play on the field. This team was not, a game-breaking team, but they got in some good games. They beat Team Holmes in the first round, but Team Holmes put up 2 or 3 points, and then they won the championship game against Team Johnny, again 2 or 3 points. So they didn't blow anybody out of the water, but they won, and they looked good doing it. John Macca was big, Nick Muse was big, so this team had some talent, but that's why they're in the 7th spot. Just not a super dominant performance. We'll move on to the 6th spot. This is the 2017-2018 Team Frank, and this was a serious team. This was when games were to 6. They won 12-3 total. This is Frank, John Macca, Wes Sullivan, Joe Labo, Nick Gerasi, and Lorenzo Labazetta. You lost to that team in the championship.
Yes.
What do you remember about them?
That hurt. That was like the first year I didn't come home with the ring, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that would have been correct.
But the big thing about that team is they had no first-round pick that year.
No first-round pick. They traded out of the first round. They had 3 second-round picks, which is historic in itself. But yes, no first-round pick. Another thing I like to remember about this team was this was the first team to utilize armbands and have such a diverse playbook, and obviously that showed on the field. They were dominant throughout.
And that changed everything going forward. Now you don't see a team out there without the armband.
Another thing has to be considered in terms of the cultural impact of this roster is this was the last year of Team Frank.
Yeah, the last year.
Pretty unbelievable.
Frank Samisa leading the charge.
That was what would have been year 6 of the league, so 6 straight years of Team Frank being a staple, not always winning, but being a staple. Obviously, they had the one loss. And let's not forget, Frank wins Bowl 3, 4, 5, and 6. So this was the 4-peat year for Team Frank. Pretty unbelievable.
And he ended on a big note with 12 passing touchdowns.
Yeah, that was obviously a record that'll probably never be broken. MVP, which was his second MVP. I think the reason this team, though, is in the 6th spot and not maybe any higher is, they were dialed in on offense, they were dialed in on defense, but they were also methodical in the way they did things. This wasn't a team that was beating everybody deep in one-play drives. This was a team that was marching down the field using that playbook. So I think that's maybe why, even though they were so dominant, There's a couple Hall of Famers on this team, but it's not full Hall of Famers, just Frank and Joe Labo.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it wasn't a crazy talented roster. Now we're going to move on to the 5 spot, the 2013-2014 Team Dan. This was year 2. This was Dan's first ring. This is, in my opinion, the most underrated roster of all time. I know I put myself in the 5 spot, but they're better than that. You look across the board. It's Dan O'Shea, Dan Escobar, Lorenzo Labazetta, Joe Labazetta, Justin O'Shea, Colin Tully, Nino, and Holmes. This was a good team, and Colin, obviously, a historic MVP performance.
A lot of talent on that team. In the first year, the experiment of the flag.
Yes, the first
year.
and only. First
and only. The experiment failed.
What do you remember about that game, knowing that you only had maybe 1 or 2 catches? It wasn't a big game for you because Colin was rushing so well. What do you remember about being down on the field?
Yeah, I just had to hamper my expectations. I saw what the day was bringing. We were rushing the ball well. We didn't have a defined quarterback per se. Renzo was still early on in his career,
sure,
and I guess people weren't ready to hand it over to him. But we saw the rushing was working with the flag football, and we just ran with it.
So Colin Tully, we'll go into a show maybe next week or the week after where we're going to rank each MVP performance as well. For me, and for what it's worth, Colin Tully in this game, one of the greatest performances of all time. 6 rushing touchdowns, 4 passing touchdowns. He accounted for every score, and the 6 rushing touchdowns will never be touched. It will never be done again. It was an unbelievable performance.
And Dan and Coach Dan's first ring.
Coach Dan's first ring, and unfortunately for Dan, it would be his last ring for a few years, but he did climb that mountain again, as we talked about. All right. We're going to move into the number 4 spot here. This was last year's champion, the Team Tully, the Biltmore Drivers. This was Frank Samisa, Colin Tully, Ian Tully, Nick Del Monte, later be named MVP, and Joe Labo at center.
It's a great team.
It was a great team. Roster evaluation, this is full of Hall of Famers, and Nick Del Monte will probably be a Hall of Famer at some point as well. So
I agree.
This roster was loaded. What we saw on the field, though, was not indicative of a loaded roster. This was, you could blame it on snow conditions, the field was not beautiful, or you could blame it on the fact that this team never, not once, had a 5-man practice. Yeah. They never practiced as a full team.
Yeah.
But the result was that they did not blow teams out of the water. Obviously, they beat the Mothmen in the championship 5-0. That's obviously a blowout, but it was a very close 5-0 somehow. And the first game went double overtime. So when you look at the score total, I think they end up winning 11-5 on the day. When you look at the total of both games, it was closer than it had to be.
That first game, they were lucky to get out of there. Team Shoe with the Roadies took them to double overtime, first double overtime of the league history. Probably, in my opinion, that I think is the greatest game.
Oh, for sure.
But bar none.
For sure. And, you look at the lack of practice time as we talked about. You look at the field condition as we talked about. But it also just wasn't what you expect out of a Frank Samisa-led offense. I mean, they were running the ball with Nick Del Monte. Nick Del Monte scores a defensive touchdown. Obviously, Nick Del Monte wins MVP that year. He had 5 total touchdowns, a crazy number.
But you know what? I'll have to, like you said, it may not have been a typical Frank Samisa type offense, but when you have Frank Samisa, he's the kind of guy that notices, hey, we're running well.
Yeah.
We can't, the passes aren't coming down with the field conditions, and he's the kind of player you need to, make that swap.
He'll do what he has to do to win, but I think what gets them in the 4 spot and not necessarily, in the top 3 is just the fact that, those games were probably closer than they had to be. We're going to move on to the 3 spot. This is the 2014-2015 Team Frank. This is the infamous, you may not remember that Team Frank just based on the year, but you'll remember when I say the words 10-1. The infamous 10-1 team beat Dan O'Shea's ass into oblivion. He couldn't stand after this game. This was probably the most lopsided game, and we've had some 5-0 in the 4-team error wins. We've had a couple of those, but nothing felt as lopsided as this 10-1 game. Those guys on that other team were absolutely devastated.
Yeah, that's complete domination when you walk away, only letting up 1 score.
You're obviously on that team. It's Frank Samisa, his first MVP, Ian Tully, Justin O'Shea, Labo, Gerasi, it's Holmes. What do you remember about that day?
I remember that was probably one of my favorite days out there. To go out there, with the guys like Frank and Ian, 2 of my all-time greats, a guy like Joe Labo, Gerasi, and the good old coach before he had a before he had a team.
The coach,
It might have been that's the year that he proved that he could.
Yeah, that was his last year not being a coach.
Yeah.
So let's not forget they beat a very good team. People think 10-1 it must have been lopsided rosters. This team had Colin Tully fresh off MVP. This team had Jammer, John Samisa, in his only bowl appearance, a great athlete.
Great.
His team had Lorenzo Labazetta. This was not a scrub team. They get beat 10-1. Let's remember this is a lot more than just, getting beat. This is Dan getting embarrassed. This is the start of the stigma that Dan can't get it done. And this is fresh off him winning a championship, and it had already begun. It was not a good time for Dan O'Shea.
No, he really needed to prove after that year.
For sure.
Still earned the spot as a coach, and he eventually did.
I think that in terms of on-field dominance, this is probably maybe the second greatest team of all time, but we'll move to the number 2 team, which I just think had a slightly better roster. The number 2 team is the 2015-2016 Team Frank. This team beat the first year of Team Holmes 3-2 in the only timed game. Tell me what you remember about that game.
I remember there was a little bit of controversy.
I don't know why, but there was.
People were complaining about the time, saying that something was a little fishy at the end. I don't recall anything, that I witnessed.
I was down on the sideline. At that time, I was a journalist for the local newspaper, and I remember that game vividly. I remember the possessions back and forth, and I remember Team Holmes getting the ball with a chance to tie the game at 3-3. Let's also not forget that they had the ball after the game was tied at 2-2, and Nick Gerasi threw an interception to Justin to set up what was ultimately the game-winning score.
That's personally one of my favorite memories of I've had in a game. Just
because
to come down with that.
That game you had, correct me if I'm wrong, no receptions. You just had the pick.
Yeah.
And it couldn't have been a bigger play.
No, hey, got to be there when your team needs you.
So let's go over the roster, which we didn't do. It's Frank Samisa, Colin Tully, Justin O'Shea, John Macca's rookie year. It's Mr. Nino, it's Labo, and Ian Tully later to be named MVP. Now, this game is important because Frank Samisa starts the game so poorly, down 2-0, he benches himself. Believe it or not, people seem to forget this, but Mr. Nino comes in at quarterback in relief and throws a pick right away.
Immediately.
So Ian Tully then replaces Mr. Nino, and Ian Tully leads what is still the greatest comeback 2-point deficit of all time. He leads the comeback. He starts it off throwing the deep touchdown to Frank, who felt useless all day after that start at quarterback, but catches the touchdown that gets the roll started. He then throws a touchdown to Joe Labo, back right corner of the end zone, to make it 2-2. And let's not forget one of the coolest moments of LOL history. He throws the game-winning touchdown to his own brother, Colin Tully. Pretty cool stuff. But I think the most underrated part of that game, the part no one talks about, is up 2-0. Nick Gerasi has the ball within the 5-yard line and has a chance to go up 3-0. Ray Sullivan snaps the ball over his head.
Yes, that was big.
And obviously Team Frank takes over on downs. What do you remember about that play?
I mean, the eyes light up. It gives you some more breath to feel, it's not over. Let's do this.
That's when Ian starts the big play to Frank downfield. That's what got it all started, that snap. Because if they would have went up 3-0, I don't think Team Frank comes back. I think Team Holmes has that championship early on. But the reason they're in the 2 spot, despite the fact that they have every single member of the Hall of Fame on this roster, I think it's the best roster ever. But the reason they're at the 2 spot and not the 1 spot is they only won the game 3-2. I know that has a lot to do with it being a time game and all that stuff, but it wasn't a super dominant performance.
No, down 2. They come back and win it, but underachieved. Sure that year.
So that brings us to the number 1 team, and I'm going to have a lot of questions for you about this one. The 2016-2017 Team Frank, this was the first year of 4 teams, dominant 10-2 performance. It's Frank Samisa with his, I think this would have been his second MVP.
Yeah, I believe.
It's Frank Samisa, Justin O'Shea, Lorenzo Labazetta, USC Steve. Can't forget Steve was there, Coach Holmes' good friend.
Yeah.
Steve was on the team, and Ken Silver was at center. What do you remember about this team?
One of my favorite parts was the year that we implemented the hand signals.
Yes.
And that was crucial. You saw something at the line, you would throw up a hand signal, and it proved to work.
So we talked about the first Team Frank to have the armbands, but this was the first team to ever have an implemented system.
Yeah.
And Frank would get to the line of scrimmage. They would not huddle. Frank would get to the line of scrimmage and give everybody a route just based on hand signals.
Yeah, based on the
defense. That had never been done. That was pretty crazy based on matchups. And they were flat out dominant. They win the first game 5-0 against the first incarnation of whatever you want to call it, Team Shu, Team Johnny. They just blew them out of the water. And then they win the championship game, obviously 5-2, but in a game that was never close.
Not never close, but they scored every single time they touched the ball.
This is the only team to never have a turnover or punt in either game.
I believe 4 total incompletions.
4 incompletions for Frank Samisa that day on his way to MVP. It was the greatest quarterback performance of all time, which is absolutely crazy because we just talked about the 10-1 team, and this was better. This was that much better. Ken Silver obviously wins. This is his first center of the year on his way to being a great center, and we'll have him on later to talk to him about it. But, you guys beat Team Holmes, and then you get to the parking lot, you're celebrating with the trophy, and you start hearing about this beef between Holmes and Labo, and they're meeting at Manhattan Bagel. Do you remember anything about that?
6-cylinder bitch.
I do remember the quote, 6-cylinder
that.
bitch. Yeah, that was a good
A lot of people, there wasn't a lot to show that was going to happen. And then all of a sudden, at the end of the day, tempers boil over.
I think they go into that first round matchup against Team Dan. It's a fucking nail-biter. They're on each other nonstop. Then they go into the championship game thinking they've got a chance because they just played well and won, and they just get obliterated. Tempers flare, and it boiled over, and Holmes and Labo, for whatever reason, got into it. Guys that are usually great friends, but I'll never forget Meet Me at Manhattan Bagel.
Meet Me at Manhattan Bagel.
I hadn't heard it for a few years prior to that, but it always comes back full circle. So that's the number one team, that 2016-2017 Team Frank. I think we both agree that was probably the best team of all time. All right, we're going to take a break. We're going to have Ken Silver coming up next for an interview. I'm really excited to get to that. But thank you for being a part of that segment with me, Justin.
Absolutely, man. Happy to be here.
Oh, yeah.
What's up, guys? It's your good old Coach Holmes, and I'm here to make sure you live to play another game. As we all know by now, COVID is a very serious disease that was not deliberately created in a U.S.-funded laboratory. Someone just fucked a bat. Even amongst all the protocols our league has implemented to keep our players safe, I cannot stress enough that you get vaccinated. Trust me, it definitely works sometimes. Whether it's Pfizer, Moderna, or Johnson & Johnson, these are all reputable companies that have your best interest at heart. Although we still are not sure of the ingredients and possible side effects, and there's never been adequate testing, that's a gamble I'm willing for you to take. So do the right thing, forget the facts, and get the vax.
All right, we're back with the LOL podcast, the official LOL podcast. It's your boy, Frankie Nuñez. I'm still joined by my co-host, Justin O'Shea, the Hall of Fame wide receiver. And we've got Justin O'Shea's teammate on the Neighborhood Roadies. The Neighborhood Roadies. It's Ken Silver. Ken, are you happy to be here?
I am thrilled. I've been wanting this for a long time.
You asked. You asked for a while. I kept shutting you down.
Well, I just wanted to show that I'm a serious player and I'm taking this year seriously.
Okay, that's good to know. All right, so we're going to get straight into questions. We're all business here, as you know. You've been on 2 championship rosters. How does this year's Roadies roster stack up to those championship teams?
Well, I'll say this. Those championship teams were really special. But when you look at my team with an MVP and a Hall of Famer, I think this could be the most talented team I've ever played with.
That's my boy.
There it is. I'm sure Justin likes hearing that. Speaking of Justin, what has it been like? Obviously, this will be the third time. If you win this year, it'll be the third time you've won, and all 3 times would have been with Justin O'Shea. What is playing with Justin O'Shea like, and what has it meant to you to have that opportunity a few times now?
Well, playing with somebody as talented and athletic as him just pushes me to elevate and get to that level. So having him on my team is just constant inspiration. I'd love to win a third.
Oh, yeah. All right. Tell me about how playing football, is similar to horseback riding.
How is it similar?
Yeah.
Well, sometimes, you just got to hang on for dear life. It's the same thing, You're on a horse or you're trying to catch a football. You're trying to just hold on.
Do you have any competitions scheduled for this winter, or is that more of a summer thing?
That's more of a summer thing, honestly. But, so football is my off season, get me into shape, and, we get out with the horses in the summer.
All right, so did you get a chance to see the interview last week with Nick Del Monte, your teammate?
I saw the beginning, yeah.
All right, so I asked this question to Nick, but I really want to ask it to you. It's important. You grew up in a family with John Samisa, the Jammer, Frank Samisa, and Nick Del Monte himself. What was it like, growing up in that family, competing against one another, and how did it bring out the best in each of you?
Well, I'll say this. I was always a little bit more of the heavier one. So, after years of watching other people, be successful, it started to push me too, to try and thin myself out and become more fit and athletic.
Well, going into draft night, we didn't think that was the case.
Well,
300-pound rumors.
300 pounds, multiple failed gastric bypasses. I decided enough was enough. So, I got on Jenny Craig and I started running hills.
Running the hill. I mean, you talk about it often. Is it something you're doing daily, or is it something that you're doing in your sleep dreaming?
No. It's, it's 4 a.m., getting up, going to the gym, doing the best I can. I mean, I lost since draft night maybe 70 pounds.
Jesus,
good.
Yeah. It's been great.
Tell me a little bit about the beef between you and Nick Del Monte on draft night. Was that real, or is that media made? And keep in mind that, he said that this beef has been going on since childhood. Is there any truth to that, or is this...
Well, look, you can't... Everything comes out like COVID. Everything that comes out of the news is fake,
Fake news.
You can't believe that. It's fake news, man.
So your relationship with Nick Del Monte is as good as it gets?
No, it's solid, It's like two brothers.
Has his play at quarterback impressed you, and were you surprised that he was named the starter?
I was happy. So it took a lot of the pressure off me, and he was happy to hold that pressure, and I think it's gone great.
Do you feel like you got a fair shot at quarterback?
Well, I mean, did I get a fair shot? I probably could have gotten more opportunities, but I had agreed that it's better to have somebody with mobility as well, because we don't have a natural passer on the team.
Sure. So you're a two-time center of the year. Do you believe you're the best center of all time?
I mean, look at the competition, so it's like, it's not exactly a challenge, but yeah, I guess so.
Well, let's listen. Joe Labo's got 5 rings. He's got 2 center of the years as well. He's got plenty of touchdowns. I mean, it's an obvious competition between you guys, and I'm not trying to get you to say anything negative about Joe Labo, but do you feel as if you're the standard at that position?
Well, I'd like to think I can do it all.
Of course.
Catch passes, run deep routes, short, and I mean, have you ever heard me complain?
Never.
Yeah, right.
Never complained.
Never.
So we haven't seen much of the Biltmore drivers this year, but can you tell us what you've seen out there from Team Mothman and the Pooshpatuck Smokes?
I mean, I like what I see. They're certainly dynamic on offense and defense, especially, the Smokes. They've been the most complete team. Mothman, they showed some moments, some flashes in the beginning. Obviously, they've fallen off a bit, but I think that could come together with a full, healthy roster.
Agreed.
Speaking of the Smokes, why don't you try to tell us in your own words, and we'll mute Justin for this. He won't hear you. What went wrong last year with last year's Smokes team?
Well, I mean, a lot of it's got to be pointed at the synergy between the two coaches. There just was none. One coach wanted to do it a certain way, the wrong way, and another coach wanted to do it a different way. It is what it is.
To elaborate on that, why don't you tell us a little bit about your relationship with Dan O'Shea? On draft night, you made it very clear if you were drafted by Dan, you would retire. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with Dan O'Shea.
Well, obviously, I regret saying that because of the talent on the team, but that doesn't change the fact that Dan was there was just no chemistry there. I mean, I think I'm going to have to stand by my decision. I'd rather retire than play for Coach Dan.
So it's obviously been 10 years of LOL football, and just like Nick Del Monte, you've been involved for 6 of them. And just like Nick Del Monte, when I think of you or Nick, I think of someone that's relatively new to the league, but 6 years is a very big portion of that 10 years. What has the league meant to you, and how has it evolved over those years?
Well, I mean, in the beginning, it's let me just go to the field and catch some passes, right? I want to just think about me and going out there and flashing around, but it's become like a little family sport for me, and I want to just do the best for my team, go out there, get some wins, have some good memories, and dedicate myself to the league.
Yeah, I mean that's it seems to be the consensus. I've asked everyone that question, and that family environment, that family atmosphere seems to be something everybody can agree on.
Absolutely.
Ken, we were very happy to have you on. Justin, you got one more? I'm sorry.
No. I think he's said enough.
Yeah, Ken, we were happy to have you on. We hope to have you on again soon. I hope you had a good time with us. All right, buddy?
Yep, yeah. And listen, guys, I had contact with COVID last week, but I just wanted to show you I am vaccinated.
Wow. It's the same card Holmes has.
So we're good to go. I am officially cleared.
All right.
Love you, Ken.
We love you, Ken. That was our interview with Ken Silver. We'll be right back. Thank you.
All right, guys.
It's called Adderall. I mix it with alcohol. And at the bottom of the shot is a tramadol. Yeah, it's fucking Donovan, piss drunk, wobbling. It's not on your couch cause I popped a couple Clonopins. And when I get set up on it, it better be gin. Pedaling fast on my 97
All right. Welcome back to the official LOL podcast. It's Frankie Nuñez. We've got time for just a few more questions, and I figured what better opportunity. I'm sitting next to a Hall of Famer in Justin O'Shea. So before we close it up, you cool with answering a few?
Absolutely. Let's get it.
All right. The Roadies. This is your first time playing for Coach Nick Muse, and you've played against him plenty. What has he brought to the table?
I'll say, man, coming into the year, I didn't expect too much. And honestly, I used to have that feeling, but after watching the way they played last year in that first double overtime game, I know Nick Muse has what it takes to be the coach, and I was really excited to play with the guys that I got on the team.
Historically, Nick Muse has been, sort of the anchor that drove the Nick Gerasi dink and dunk offense for the Roadies. But now, obviously, we haven't seen a huge sample size, but what we saw from Nick Del Monte at quarterback is this crazy deep passing attack. I'd like to believe that you had something to do with that transition, or was that just made up on the fly?
Nick Del Monte, he's an air raid kind of guy.
Sure.
And when you have a guy like me, Ken Silver, Nick Muse has been pulling him down deep. I think he knows what he has to do. And me personally, I love it. The dink and dunk serves its purpose,
Sure.
but let's air it out.
So, obviously, last week, and you've been medically cleared, but last week you're out with COVID. What was that like? And, obviously you're feeling better, but, were you worried at any point?
I was a little worried. There were some dark moments there. My wife called the coroner, reading me my last rites.
How was Dan O'Shea? I know Dan O'Shea wasn't doing so hot there.
He's still on the vent, man.
He's still on the vent.
Still on the vent, dude.
Shout out to Dan O'Shea. We hope you get better. So, you've won 6 rings. You're in pursuit of 7. For the longest time, the narrative with Frank Samisa was that he couldn't win without Justin until he did that in Bowl 6, I believe it was. You haven't won without Frank since Bowl 2. Is that narrative starting to flip, and what do you have to do to kind of change that?
I take responsibility. I think that narrative has flipped to maybe prove that Frank may have been the strong part in that. Quarterback's your most, the biggest and most important position on the league. And I know this year I have to prove myself. I've got Del Monte. I like the team I have around me, and I just have to play my best to prove
it's very talented,
my work.
Very talented roster. So draft night was kind of chaotic for everybody. It was quite a scene. Why don't you give me a couple bits and pieces of what you remember and maybe some highlights that you had that night?
So as soon as Nick Muse picked me, we got to work. He came right over to me. What I love about him is he was asking my opinion, who do you want? We decided to go with Del Monte. You got to take the best player available.
Sure.
And by far and away, I think he was there.
Yeah.
So I was really happy to get with him. When you get down to the third round, I was very happy to pick Ken Silver. But I watched one man's reaction when that went on. And I looked Del Monte right in the eyes. And he immediately booed the pick heavily, screaming, I believe, quote, "not my quarterback."
Yeah, that was the quote. Were you surprised to not go number 1 to Team Dan?
I wasn't. After last year, I know I played quarterback, not my strong suit, as we've all seen. But, I feel like you got to go quarterback, and Frankie deserved it this year.
Let's think a little bit about that second round. I know you said Nick Del Monte was the best player available. Obviously, Nick Muse was lobbying at some point for Nick Gerasi. Were you guys surprised he wasn't there in the third round? I know you're happy to get Ken, but were you surprised Gerasi wasn't available?
We thought we would have a shot with him there. We really did. We were not sure how the Puspatuck Smokes were going to go. I know Frank historically has a strong hatred for Nick Gerasi, but they decided to take him one pick in front of us, and you know what? I think things worked out for the better, and we really like our team this year.
We've got just another minute, so I'll end it the way I end every interview. 10 years of LOL football, and you have been a part of all 10. What has it meant to you? How has the league evolved?
The league has evolved immensely. I mean, we started off 2 teams, just, let's go down to the field, not much practice, not much game planning per se. Now you've got teams out there with armbands, and to just show up and play with 24 of my brothers every year is phenomenal. I say the same thing whether I see you every day, every weekend, or once a year. For that big game, I'm happy for it, and I love everybody that shows up and puts in hard work, and it's great.
For us fans, it never goes unnoticed how much hard work you put in as the president of the Players Association and as a guy who just generally cares about all the people and what happens in the league. So a salute to you, and we thank you very much. That's all the time we have. I want to thank my guest, Justin O'Shea, for being on.
Thank you, Frankie.
I want to thank Ken Silver for being on. I want to thank Pfizer for issuing him a vaccination card. And as always, a thank you to my producer, Kevin McCarthy, and Mini Jamie over here. He's the best in the business. All right, we'll see you next week. Thanks again, guys.
Than that glamorous nigga. Cap like a semi-automatic killer automaton. Apocalyptic phenomenon. My top equipped with the denim on. The shiver got venom on. The safety, it's never.